welcome to Solving Watercolour. I'm always looking for new ways to keep my paintings fresh. It's easy to fall into a predictable pattern, especially when it comes to colours. And I was looking through my friend's Instagram photos recently, and I came across this photo which really caught my eye. I like the composition and the way the shadows and the path create a lead-in to the focal point of the park bench. The thing that probably caught my eye the most though was how the filter that's been used on the photo really pushes the colours in an interesting way. The blues in the background are really strong, intense blue, and those purple shadows in the foreground. All in all, it's a colour palette that I probably would never have come up with myself, so I decided to paint it and see where it took me. I worked for a long time as a digital illustrator, so if you're familiar with Photoshop, you can think of a painting in terms of Photoshop layers. Layer 1 in this case is going to be a blurry wet into wet wash that's going to establish the main background base layer of colours. I'm using a warm green mix from New Gamboge and Ultramarine, and that intense blue is Phthalo blue. I often use it very diluted as a summer sky colour, but using it like this as the background foliage is something that I wouldn't normally do because it's quite an unnaturally intense blue. So the inspiration for that came directly from the Instagram photo. And the brush I'm using is a number 4 mop brush, which holds a lot of paint, which is good for painting wet into wet washes where I have to cover a large area of paper in a short amount of time. I'm also making sure I leave some white spots on the paper, just completely unpainted, just to give it a bit of sparkle. So moving back up the paper now into the sky area, I'm hardly going to put any blue in the sky at all. I want that golden glow of sunlight and the green from the foliage of the trees. And for that I'm going to use some burnt sienna, and I'm going to add some Prussian blue into my green mixture just to make it dark, and I'm going to vary the green up quite a bit because I want a whole range of greens here, not just one flat green colour. What you choose not to paint is often as important as what you choose to paint, so make sure, especially when you're painting trees, to leave plenty of gaps in between the foliage, some white space there to show the background coming through the trees. Okay, so I think that'll do for my background wash now. I'm going to move on to the trees, and for the trees I'm using a flat brush with a combination of ultramarine and burnt umber. It might sound a bit counterintuitive, but I really like to paint trees from the top down, starting with the branches and then going into the thicker trunk of the tree. The reason for this is because when you paint a tree from the bottom and paint it upwards, you're pushing your brush away from you and you've got less control over the brush than when you pull it towards you. So that's just a little tip. Try it both ways and see which works best. So now I've established that larger tree in the foreground, I'm going to move on to the trees in the background. They're getting progressively skinnier, of course, as the perspective takes them further away from us. And I'm just switching to a rigger brush for the branches. I find it works best if you hold it closer to the end of the brush rather than gripping it tightly at the tip. For some reason it just gives a more natural flicking action to the brush stroke, which makes for a natural looking tree branch. At least I think it does anyway. So now we've got those trees established, it really brings the whole painting into focus. Again, just loosely using my rigger brush on its side and the texture of the paper to help me get those shapes in there. Now for the park bench, it's quite a regular shape, and I find that using a small flat brush is always good for this kind of thing. So I've just kind of turned it on its edge there, and I'm just dabbing in those lines which are the slats on the back of the bench. And here's the bit of the painting that I was looking forward the most to painting. It's those long shadows coming off the trees and the park bench, and see how they're all converging towards a point. And I'm using dioxazine purple mixed with just a bit of Payne's grey just to tone it down a little bit for those shadows. So here I'm just flicking on a bit of paint to add a bit of texture for the foreground, and I'm going to create some texture on the trees as well by lifting out some colour, and that will give a more three-dimensional appearance to the bark. And that's pretty much where I'm going to leave this one. I'm just going to put in a few more dark details on the trees and I'll call that one done. So my main takeaway for today is take your inspiration wherever you can find it. Just because something's been enhanced by a computer algorithm doesn't mean that you can't use it for inspiration in a watercolour. Remember, if you're using the work of a photographer for a painting, it's always good practice to ask the permission and give them a credit if possible. So thanks for this one, Steve, and keep up the good work. So if you're looking for some more ideas on how to break out of a watercolour rut, then head on over to my website solvingwatercolor.com. I've got a blog post on this very subject and the link is in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will speak to you soon.